This video is for lovers of scary stories. There will be no scary pictures and so on. The video is created to be listened to in the background. If you like this format, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like, and write a comment. Enjoy listening to everyone.
Call from beyond the grave. Imagine a Friday evening, September 12th, 2008. Los Angeles is sinking into sunset as the commuter train Metrolink sets off. Its passengers are ordinary people hurrying home after a long workday. Among them is 49-year-old Charles Peck, who worked at one of the aviation companies in Los Angeles. That evening, he was returning home after a job interview at another company. It was an important event for Charles. He was hoping to land a new job to improve the lives of his fiancée, Andrea, and their children. But that evening would be overshadowed by tragedy. Around 4:22 p.m., the Metrolink train collided with a freight train. The cause of the accident, as would later be revealed, was the conductor's error, who missed a red signal. The collision was horrifying, but the two trains traveling at about 50 miles per hour crashed into each other. The impact was so strong that the first carriage where Charles was located was completely destroyed. Out of 225 people on board, 25 were killed, and dozens more were seriously injured. Charles Peck was among those presumed to have died almost instantly. But what happened after this tragic event is something that will remain a mystery forever, causing many to believe that death is not the end. A few hours after the crash, while rescuers were still working through the wreckage, Charles's phone started to ring. The first call went to his fiancée, Andrea. Her heart leaped with hope. Could Charles be alive? But when she answered, there was only silence on the other end. She called back, but there was no response. His phone kept ringing again and again. Over the next 12 hours following the crash, a total of 35 calls were made from Charles's phone. These calls weren't just made to Andrea, but also to his son, brother, sister, and mother. They all hoped that Charles had survived and was somehow trying to reach out to them from beneath the wreckage. Yet, each time they answered it, there was only silence. The calls came at regular intervals, as if someone was trying to get attention but was unable to speak. The rescuers, working tirelessly through the debris, were spurred on by the continued calls, believing they were getting closer to Charles. But sadly, when they finally found his body, it was clear he had died immediately upon impact. His phone was found near him, still intact, but all the calls had ceased once his body was discovered. This case left many unanswered questions. Who or what was making those calls to his family? Was it just a coincidence, a glitch in the system, or perhaps could it have been Charles himself, somehow trying to send a message from the afterlife? Some people, especially his relatives, believed that it was his spirit, perhaps unaware that he had died, continuing to reach out to those he loved. Andrea, his fiancée, recalled how each time she picked up the phone, she hoped to hear his voice. Although she never heard it, these calls gave her comfort, as if he was trying to say one final goodbye. Paranormal experts who later analyzed the case considered the possibility that Charles's soul had been trying to reach out to the living world, not realizing that he had passed on. Such cases, they argue, are not uncommon among those who die suddenly or violently. Perhaps his soul was in shock, searching for a way to say, "I'm still here," even though physically he was gone. On the other hand, skeptics argued that the calls could have been the result of a glitch in the phone system, especially considering the major crash that disrupted many communications. However, no technical explanation has ever fully accounted for the precise timing and regularity of the calls. Regardless of the cause, these events left a deep impression on those close to Charles. His family still remembers the calls to this day, calls that may have been the last echo of love from beyond the grave. The Ghost on the Road. This story took place in Scotland in the 1950s, near the city of Glasgow. Back then, a local highway, known as the Ghost Road, was frequently used by motorists. At first glance, it was just an ordinary road leading to villages and small towns. But something strange began to happen there with terrifying regularity. It all started with one incident. On a foggy morning, a driver was traveling down the highway when suddenly a figure of a woman in a white dress appeared in front of his car. She looked so real that the driver immediately slammed on the brakes, hoping to avoid hitting her. But as soon as his car stopped, the woman disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared. This was the first incident, but far from the last. A similar story happened a few days later. This time the victim was a local man named John, who was returning home from his evening shift. As he drove along the same road, the woman appeared again before his eyes. She was dressed in a long white wedding gown, her face pale and her hair flowing over her shoulders. John swerved the wheel sharply, trying to avoid hitting her, and his car veered off the road, nearly crashing into a tree. He got out of the car, shaken, and began looking around the scene. The woman was gone. He was so terrified that he hurried away as quickly as possible. Month by month, similar stories multiplied. Dozens of drivers reported seeing the ghostly woman who suddenly appeared on the road, forcing them to brake hard or swerve to avoid a collision. Some claimed that she vanished right before their eyes, as if dissolving into thin air. Others said they had hit her, but when they got out of their cars to check, they found no one. The situation became increasingly mysterious. Some drivers began to avoid the road at night, fearing an encounter with the ghost. The legend of the woman in white spread throughout the region. People began to wonder, who was this woman, and why was she wandering the highway, frightening motorists? Soon, a group of local residents and paranormal researchers decided to conduct their own investigation. They discovered that many years ago, on that very stretch of road, a tragedy had occurred. A young woman, whose name history has not preserved, was traveling on her wedding day with her fiancé along this road when their car was involved in a terrible accident. The fiancé died instantly, and the bride was severely injured and died at the scene, unable to be saved. It is believed that her soul, never finding peace, remained wandering the place, repeating her final journey. Over time, sightings of the ghost became more frequent. Drivers began reporting seeing the woman not only on the road, but also among the trees by the roadside, where she seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Those who encountered her said that she looked at them with a sorrow and pain in her eyes, as if trying to find her fiancé or asking for help. One night, a truck driver named Robert had his own encounter with this ghost. He was driving along the highway when suddenly, in the glare of his headlights, he saw a woman in white standing directly on the road. He braked as fast as he could, but still felt a thud, as if he had hit someone. Frantically, he jumped out of the cab and started examining the area. But there was nothing. No body. No marks on the road. He stood in complete darkness, the only sounds being his own panicked breathing and the rustling of wind in the trees. Then, as he later claimed, he heard a faint, almost weeping voice. Glancing toward the trees, Robert saw the silhouette of a woman standing among them. She looked at him and then disappeared into the shadows, leaving him frozen with fear. After this encounter, rumors of the ghost spread even more widely, and local residents began to avoid this section of road at night. Some even attempted to perform rituals to bless the road and calm the restless spirit. However, despite all efforts, strange sightings of the woman in white continue to this day. Drivers still report encountering her, and many believe that her spirit still roams the road, hoping that one day she will reunite with her fiancé and finally find peace. Robert the Doll. The story begins in the late 19th century in Key West, Florida, in the home of the Otto family. A young boy named Robert Eugene Otto, better known as Jean or simply Jean, was the only child in the family. On his 4th birthday, his parents gave him a doll. The doll was almost as tall as he was, about 3 feet, with glass eyes, a painted face, and dressed in a sailor suit that eerily resembled one of Jean's own outfits. The boy was delighted with the gift and named the doll after himself, Robert. From the very beginning, their relationship was strange. Jean treated the doll like a living being. He talked to it, fed it, and even asked his parents to feed and tuck Robert into bed in a separate bed. However, soon his parents noticed something even stranger. Sometimes they would hear Jean talking to the doll in his room, but what was even more frightening, from behind the door they heard not only the boy's voice, but also a second, low, whispering voice, seemingly coming from the doll. Over time, the strangeness increased. At night, strange sounds could be heard in the house. Soft footsteps, odd rustling, and whispers. One night, Jean screamed from his room, and his parents rushed to him. When they entered, they found overturned furniture, scattered toys, and Jean sitting on his bed in a state of terror. "It wasn't me. It was Robert," he insisted, pointing to the doll, sitting eerily calm in the corner of the room. From that moment, even more frightening events began to happen in the house. The family claimed that the doll could change its position. They would find it in different parts of the house, even though no one had moved it. People reported that the doll watched them, turned its head, or even made strange noises. The locals began to avoid the house, believing it to be cursed. As time passed, Jean grew up and became an artist. He inherited his parents' house and continued living there with his wife. Despite becoming an adult, he could not part with Robert. He built a special room for the doll in the attic and spent a lot of time with it. Jean's wife was unhappy with such strange behavior and claimed that the doll had some kind of strange influence over him. One night, Jean's wife heard strange noises from the attic. When she went up, she found Jean lying unconscious on the floor, with Robert sitting nearby, as if watching him. After this incident, Jean's wife insisted that the doll be locked away in a trunk and hidden. But even after that, strange events continued. The couple constantly heard footsteps in the attic, and the furniture in the house was frequently found moved. After Jean's death in 1974, the house and the doll were sold to a new family. The new owners, unaware of the doll's sinister reputation, left it in the attic. However, soon, their daughter began complaining about strange things. She claimed that the dog got up at night and threatened her. The girl said that Robert tried to strangle her, and she was too terrified to sleep. At first, the parents didn't believe her, but after witnessing some of the strange occurrences themselves, they decided to get rid of the doll. Robert was donated to the East Martello Museum in Key West, where he remains to this day. Although Robert is now kept behind glass, his reputation remains chilling. Museum visitors claim that the doll can move its glass eyes, change its facial expression, or even make quiet sounds. There is even a legend that if someone tries to take a photo of the doll without permission, they will be cursed with bad luck and misfortune. Museum staff say that you must apologize to Robert and ask for permission before taking his photo. If you don't, you might bring a curse upon yourself. To this day, many people send letters of apology to the museum, hoping to lift the curse they believe Robert has placed on them. The mysterious disappearance of the Jameson family. In October 2009, one of the most unsettling and baffling cases in modern American history began to unfold. The Jameson family, Bobby, Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, vanished without a trace while searching for land in a remote area of the San Bois Mountains in Oklahoma. Their disappearance remains one of the most mysterious unsolved cases to this day. The Jameson family had been planning to move away from their home in Eufaula, Oklahoma, to live a simpler, quieter life in the countryside. They were looking to purchase a 40-acre plot of land near Red Oak, Oklahoma, where they intended to live in a storage container that they already owned. On October 8, 2009, the family set out on a trip to inspect the land, taking their truck and their family dog Maisie with them. After a few days of silence and no contact with the family, concerns grew and the police began searching for them. On October 16th, the Jamesons' truck was found abandoned in a remote area miles away from the nearest town. The scene inside the truck was both eerie and confusing. The truck was locked, and inside it were the family's IDs, wallets, mobile phones, a GPS device, and around $32,000 in cash. Even more disturbing was the fact that their dog Maisie was found inside the truck barely alive after being left without food or water for days. The police were baffled by the discovery. The large amount of cash found in a bank bag under the driver's seat was especially puzzling. Despite the presence of the money, there were no signs of robbery or struggle in or around the truck. It seemed as though the family had simply walked away, leaving behind everything they owned. But why? And where did they go? The search for the Jameson family became one of the largest in Oklahoma's history, involving hundreds of people, search dogs, helicopters, and drones. However, despite the extensive efforts, no trace of the family was found for several years. The case quickly became shrouded in speculation and mystery. Various theories emerged about what might have happened to the Jamesons. One theory suggested that they had become lost or fallen victim to foul play in the remote wilderness. Some investigators believed that the family might have met with an accident or been murdered. Others speculated that the Jamesons had staged their own disappearance, possibly to escape from someone or something. There were also more bizarre theories. Some people suggested that the family might have been involved in cult activities or that they had been killed by drug traffickers. There were even rumors of paranormal activity, as Sherilyn had written in a letter that she believed their home was haunted. Bobby reportedly told friends and family that he had seen spirits and was considering using a satanic Bible to get rid of them. Another chilling detail emerged when investigators discovered that the Jamesons had installed security cameras outside their home. Footage from the camera showed the couple packing their truck in an almost trance-like state, repeatedly walking back and forth between the house and the truck without speaking to each other or showing any emotion. This eerie footage only deepened the mystery, leaving everyone wondering what was going on in the minds of Bobby and Sherilyn in the days leading up to their disappearance. For 4 years, the Jameson family remained missing, with no clues to their whereabouts. Then, in November 2013, hunters stumbled upon the skeletal remains of 2 adults and 1 child in a rugged area less than 3 miles from where the family's truck had been found. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison Jameson. However, even with the discovery of their bodies, the case remains unresolved. The remains were so badly decomposed that the cause of death could not be determined. There were no signs of obvious trauma or foul play on the bones, leaving investigators with no clear answers. The lack of evidence has fueled ongoing speculation and numerous theories about what really happened to the Jameson family. Some believe they died of exposure, becoming disoriented and succumbing to the elements in the harsh, remote wilderness. Others are convinced that they were victims of foul play, possibly connected to the strange and paranoid behavior they exhibited before their disappearance. A few still hold on to more outlandish theories, including paranormal involvement or connections to cults and dark rituals. Despite numerous investigations, interviews, and the recovery of their bodies, the exact circumstances of the Jameson family's disappearance remain unknown. What truly happened to Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison Jameson on that fateful day in 2009 may never be fully understood, but their tragic story continues to captivate those who seek the truth. The mystical incident at Chesil Cemetery. Chesil Cemetery, located in Hampshire, England, has long been a site of eerie stories and unexplained occurrences. Its dark, overgrown paths and ancient crumbling gravestones create an atmosphere ripe for ghostly tales. One of the most mysterious incidents associated with the cemetery occurred in the mid-1980s, and to this day, it continues to baffle those who hear about it. The story begins with a group of friends who had decided to spend an evening exploring the cemetery. They were thrill seekers, interested in testing the local legends and hoping to encounter something out of the ordinary. The cemetery had a reputation for being haunted, with many visitors reporting strange sights and sounds over the years. Locals often spoke of shadowy figures seen moving between the gravestones at night, eerie whispers carried on the wind, and the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. This particular night, the group entered the cemetery just after dusk, the light fading as they made their way through the winding paths. The air was cool, and a thick mist began to settle over the graves, making the old stones appear even more ghostly in the twilight. As they walked deeper into the cemetery, the mood grew heavier, and the once jovial atmosphere among the friends turned tense. It wasn't long before they began to feel unnerved by the silence that enveloped them, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves or distant sounds of animals. After about half an hour of wandering, they reached an especially remote part of the cemetery, where the gravestones were older and more weathered. One of the friends, curious and daring, suggested they attempt to contact the spirits said to haunt the cemetery. Despite their initial reluctance, the group eventually agreed. They gathered around a particular gravestone supposedly belonging to a woman named Emily, who had died under mysterious circumstances in the early 1900s. Legend had it that Emily's spirit still wandered the cemetery, searching for peace. Using a makeshift Ouija board they had brought with them, they began the seance. At first, nothing happened. The group joked nervously, trying to shake off the unsettling atmosphere. But suddenly, the planchette began to move on its own, slowly but deliberately. The group fell silent, watching in disbelief as the pointer spelled out a single word: leave. Despite the warning, the group continued their session, determined to get more answers. However, the temperature around them suddenly dropped, and a strange feeling of dread washed over them. One of the friends claimed to feel a cold hand grip his shoulder, though when he turned around, there was no one there. Another friend reported hearing faint whispers, though no one else seemed to hear them. As fear began to set in, the group decided to heed the warning and leave the cemetery. However, as they hurried back toward the entrance, something even more unsettling happened. One of the friends glanced back and saw a dark, shadowy figure standing near the gravestone where they had conducted the seance. The figure was motionless, and though it was too far away to make out any details, the group was certain it hadn't been there before. Terrified, they picked up their pace, practically running out of the cemetery. Once they reached the safety of their cars, they quickly drove away, not stopping until they were well out of sight of the cemetery's gates. For days afterward, each of them experienced strange phenomena at home: lights flickering, unexplained cold spots, and objects moving on their own. It was as if something had followed them out of Chesil Cemetery. Eventually, the disturbances faded, but the group never returned to the cemetery. The incident left a lasting impression on them, with some members believing they had angered a spirit by disturbing its rest. To this day, the story of the mysterious night at Chesil Cemetery is retold as a chilling reminder of the supernatural forces that may linger in such places, waiting for those bold or foolish enough to make contact. The Greenbrier Ghost, a haunting that solved a murder. The story of the Greenbrier Ghost is one of the most unique and bizarre cases in American history, as it is the only known case in which the testimony of a ghost was used in court to convict a murderer. This strange tale unfolded in 1897 in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, and centers around the mysterious death of a young woman named Zona Heister Shuey. Zona Heister Shuey was a 23-year-old woman who had married a blacksmith named Erasmus, also called Edward Shuey, in 1896. The marriage seemed fine on the surface, but in January 1897, just a few months after their wedding, Zona was found dead in her home under suspicious circumstances. A local boy who had been sent by Erasmus to check on her, and he found her lifeless body at the bottom of the stairs. When the local doctor, Dr. George Knapp, arrived, Erasmus was already at the scene, cradling his wife's body and behaving strangely. He seemed overly protective of Zona's corpse, refusing to let anyone touch her and becoming highly agitated when the doctor tried to examine her. Under the pressure of Erasmus's erratic behavior, Dr. Knapp conducted a quick and superficial examination. Although he noticed some bruising around Zona's neck, he ultimately concluded that she had died of everlasting faint or heart failure, possibly brought on by pregnancy. Zona was quickly buried, and the case was closed without further investigation. But Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, was not satisfied with the explanation of her daughter's death. From the beginning, she suspected foul play, particularly because she had never trusted Erasmus and believed that he had been abusive toward Zona. Soon after the funeral, Mary Jane began praying for her daughter to return to her and reveal the truth about what had happened. According to Mary Jane's later testimony, her prayers were answered in an extraordinary way. She claimed that Zona's ghost appeared to her over the course of 4 nights, revealing the true nature of her death. The ghost allegedly told Mary Jane that Erasmus had been a violent and abusive husband, and that, in a fit of rage, he had broken Zona's neck. To prove it, the ghost demonstrated how her neck had been twisted completely around. Zona's apparition was described as vivid and detailed, leaving Mary Jane utterly convinced that her daughter had been murdered. Empowered by this ghostly visitation, Mary Jane went to the local prosecutor, John Preston, and shared the story of the haunting. Although Preston was initially skeptical, Mary Jane's persistence and the strange circumstances surrounding Zona's death led him to open an investigation. With the pressure mounting, the authorities decided to exhume Zona's body for a more thorough examination. When Zona's body was re-examined, the truth came to light. The autopsy revealed clear signs of foul play. Her neck had indeed been broken, and her windpipe was crushed. There were also severe bruises on her throat, confirming that she had been strangled to death. The findings directly contradicted the original diagnosis of heart failure and provided concrete evidence that Zona had been murdered. With the new evidence in hand, Erasmus Shue was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. During the trial, Mary Jane Heaster testified about the visits from her daughter's ghost, stating that it was Zona herself who had revealed the truth. Although this testimony might seem fantastical, it played a significant role in the case, and the jury was convinced of Erasmus's guilt. He was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Erasmus never admitted to the crime, and he died in prison a few years later. The Greenbrier ghost case remains one of the most unusual legal precedents where a ghost's testimony led to a conviction. To this day, locals in Greenbrier County tell the story of Zona's restless spirit who sought justice from beyond the grave. The grave of Zona Heaster Shue can still be visited in the Greenbrier County Cemetery, and it bears a simple headstone. Near it stands a historical marker that tells the story of her death and her ghost's role in solving the crime, making her one of the few spirits in history to help bring her killer to justice. The Mystery of the Somerton Man, an Unsolved Enigma, from 1948. The mystery of the Somerton Man is one of the most perplexing and enduring unsolved cases in Australia's history. It all began on December 1st, 1948, when the body of an unidentified man was found lying on Somerton Beach near Adelaide, South Australia. The circumstances surrounding his death, combined with cryptic clues that emerged during the investigation, have puzzled authorities and intrigued amateur sleuths for decades. That morning, a couple walking along the beach noticed a man slumped against the seawall, his legs extended and feet crossed. At first, they assumed he was simply sleeping, but later it became clear that the man was dead. He appeared to be around 40 to 50 years old, in good physical shape, and dressed in a suit and tie. Oddly, all the labels on his clothing had been removed, making it impossible to identify where the garments had come from or who the man was. The police were called, and the investigation into the man's death began. Despite his well-groomed appearance and relatively new clothing, the man had no identification on him, no wallet, papers, or anything that could provide a clue to his identity. An autopsy revealed that the man had died of heart failure, but there were signs of poisoning, as his stomach contained blood, and his internal organs showed signs of damage. However, no traces of poison were found in his body, leading the investigators to speculate that he might have been poisoned by an untraceable substance. The discovery of the body soon led to an even deeper mystery. A small piece of paper was found hidden in a secret pocket of the man's trousers. The paper was torn from a book, and on it were printed the words "Tamam Shud," which translates from Persian as ended or finished. The phrase is the closing line of a famous collection of Persian poetry known as the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This strange clue raised numerous questions. Was this a cryptic message left by the man himself, or was it connected to someone else? And why would it be hidden in such an odd way? The case took another bizarre turn when the police issued a public appeal for information about the man's identity. In response, a local man came forward with a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, claiming he had found it in his car, which had been parked near Somerton Beach around the time of the man's death. Strangely, the final page of this book had been torn out, and it matched the piece of paper found on the body. Adding to the mystery, the book contained a series of letters and numbers scribbled in the back, which appeared to be some sort of code. Despite extensive efforts by cryptographers, including those from military intelligence, the code has never been definitively cracked. Another lead emerged when a small suitcase was found at Adelaide's train station a few weeks after the body was discovered. The suitcase was believed to have belonged to the Somerton man, as it was checked into the station's luggage room the day before his death. Inside the suitcase were several items, including clothing, a stencil kit used for marking cargo, and a spool of orange thread identical to that used to repair the trousers the man was wearing. But, like the clothes on his body, all the labels in the suitcase had been removed, providing no further clues to his identity. One of the most intriguing pieces of the puzzle involved a nurse named Jessica Thompson, who lived near Somerton Beach. In 1949, the police showed her a plaster cast of the dead man's face, and she reportedly reacted with shock, though she denied knowing him. Interestingly, Jessica had owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, which she had given to a man named Alf Boxall, a former Army lieutenant. Initially, investigators believed that the Somerton man might have been Boxall, but they soon discovered that Boxall was alive and well, still in possession of the copy of the book that Jessica had given him. Jessica Thompson remained a figure of interest in the case, but she refused to cooperate further with the investigation. Over the years, her name has become closely associated with the mystery, with some speculating that she may have been involved with espionage, or that the Somerton man might have been a spy, possibly due to the timing of the case during the Cold War. However, no concrete evidence has ever emerged to support this theory. Despite numerous efforts to solve the case over the years, The identity of the Somerton man and the circumstances of his death remain unknown. In 2009, a South Australian professor named Derek Abbott took up the case and began a new investigation. His work led to the exhumation of the Somerton man's body in 2021 for DNA testing, which raised hopes of finally solving the mystery. Early results from the DNA testing have suggested links to a man from New Zealand, but as of today, the case remains unsolved. The disappearance of the Sodder children, a Christmas Eve mystery. The disappearance of the Sodder children remains one of the most perplexing and enduring mysteries in American history. The case centers around the Sodder family, who lived in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and their tragic Christmas Eve in 1945. The story is filled with eerie details, bizarre coincidences, and ongoing questions that have haunted the family and the community for decades. On the night of December 24th, 1945, the Sodder family was celebrating Christmas Eve in their home. George and Jenny Sodder, along with their 10 children, were in high spirits. After a festive evening, the children went to bed, and George and Jenny retired to their bedroom. The house was decorated, and the family was enjoying the holiday season, seemingly without a care in the world. However, that night, a fire broke out in the Sodder home. The blaze started around 1 a.m. and quickly engulfed the house. George and Jenny, along with 4 of their children, managed to escape the flames. However, 5 of the Sodder children, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 6, were trapped inside. Despite their efforts, George and Jenny were unable to re-enter the house to rescue their children. When the fire was finally brought under control, the ruins of the house revealed no sign of the 5 missing children. The firefighters and investigators were unable to find any remains, and the authorities concluded that the children must have perished in the fire. The official cause of the fire was determined to be an electrical fault, though this explanation did little to comfort the grieving family. The Sodders were deeply troubled by the absence of any evidence of the children's remains. Their distress grew when they learned that the fire had consumed the entire house, including the attic and the second floor, where the children had been sleeping. However, given the intensity of the fire, it seemed implausible that the remains could have been completely incinerated. The family's suspicions were further aroused by a series of strange events that occurred in the weeks leading up to the fire. In the days before Christmas, George Sodder had noticed some peculiar behavior. A few days before the fire, he had seen a suspicious vehicle parked near his house, and a man had attempted to inquire about the family's electricity usage. George had also received threats from a local man who had previously had a dispute with him. These odd occurrences led the Sodder family to believe that the fire might have been set intentionally. Adding to the mystery were reports from witnesses who claimed to have seen the Sodder children after the fire. Some said they had seen the children in a passing car, while others claimed to have seen them in the company of strangers. These reports suggested that the children might have been abducted rather than perishing in the fire. The Sodders believed that someone was trying to cover up the crime and that their children were still alive. Determined to find answers, the Sodders launched their own investigation. They hired private investigators and distributed flyers with the children's photographs, offering a reward for any information. The family received numerous tips, but none of them led to concrete evidence. Despite the ongoing efforts, the case went cold. In the years following the fire, the Sodder family continued to hold out hope that their children were still alive. They installed a large billboard near their home, which displayed the photographs of the missing children and offered a reward for information leading to their recovery. They also received a series of mysterious letters and phone calls, some of which seemed to contain cryptic messages related to the case. One of the most intriguing developments came in 1949, when a human skull was found in the vicinity of the Sodder home. The skull was later examined, but it was determined not to belong to any of the missing children. Despite this, the family remained convinced that their children had been kidnapped and that the fire was part of a larger conspiracy to cover up the abduction. The disappearance of the Sodder children remains unresolved to this day. Over the decades, the case has continued to capture public interest and inspire theories ranging from organized crime to personal vendettas. The Sodder family, despite the passage of time, never gave up hope. They continued to search for their missing children until the death of George Sodder in 1969 and Jenny Sodder in 1989. The mystery of the Sodder children is a chilling reminder of the uncertainties and unresolved questions that can haunt families. Despite numerous investigations, the disappearance of the Sodder children remains one of the most perplexing and enduring mysteries in American history. The Axeman of New Orleans, a serial killer who played jazz. The Axeman of New Orleans is one of the most infamous and chilling serial killers in American history, whose reign of terror spanned from May 1918 to October 1919. Operating in the vibrant and culturally rich city of New Orleans, Louisiana, this unidentified murderer instilled fear with a series of brutal attacks that left the community in a state of panic and confusion. The crimes. The Axeman's killing spree began on May 22, 1918, when he attacked the family of Joseph Maggio. Maggio, a 27-year-old grocer, and his wife Catherine were brutally attacked in their home. The assailant used an axe, previously owned by the Maggios, to kill them while they slept. The killer left behind an axe at the crime scene, adding a grotesque signature to his attacks. The couple's throats were slashed and their bodies were found in a horrific state. The Axeman's modus operandi involved breaking into homes through windows and attacking his victims with an axe, often found at the scene of the crime. Despite the brutal nature of the attacks, the killer did not always leave behind physical evidence that could lead to his capture. His method of entry and his choice of weapon seemed calculated to leave fear and confusion in his wake. Following the Maggio murders, the Axeman continued his spree with a series of violent attacks. On June 27, 1918, he struck again, killing 28-year-old Louis Bassumer and seriously injuring his mistress, Harriet Lowe. Bassumer's murder was particularly brutal, with the killer using a similar method of attack as before. Lowe managed to survive and later testified, but her description of the attacker was vague. The attacks continued, each one adding to the terror gripping the city. Victims included the Cortimiglia family, with 19-year-old Rose and her 9-year-old brother, who were attacked in their home in the early morning hours of August 10, 1918. The family survived, but was left with severe injuries. The panic and theories. As the murders mounted, so did the hysteria among the residents of New Orleans. The Axeman's reign of terror seemed to be random, targeting individuals from various backgrounds and professions. The killer's unpredictability and brutality led to widespread fear and suspicion. The Axeman taunted the police and the public with a letter published in a local newspaper on March 13, 1919. The letter was addressed to the Honorable Chief of Police and famously signed the Axeman. In it, the killer declared that he would spare anyone playing jazz music in their homes on the night of March 19, 1919, a date that coincided with the celebration of the Feast of St. Joseph. The letter read, "I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned." On the night of March 19th, 1919, jazz bands played throughout New Orleans, and, miraculously, no murders were reported that night. This eerie proof of the Axeman's ability to control events from afar added to his infamy. The end of the terror. The last known murder attributed to the Axeman occurred on October 27, 1919, when he killed 45-year-old Mrs. Anna Schneider in her home. The attack was particularly brutal, and Schneider died from severe head injuries. The city was on high alert, but the Axeman vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Despite numerous investigations and public outcry, the killer was never apprehended, and the case went cold. Theories and legacy. Numerous theories have been proposed about the identity and motives of the Axeman. Some suggest that he was a disaffected worker or a maniacal individual with a personal vendetta. Others speculate that he was part of organized crime, or that he might have been a deranged individual with no clear motive other than pure violence. The Axeman of New Orleans remains a haunting figure in the annals of American crime. His brutal attacks, taunting letters, and sudden disappearance continue to fascinate true crime enthusiasts and historians. The case remains unsolved, leaving behind a chilling legacy of terror that once gripped a city and left its mark on the history of crime. The ghost ship SS Orang Medan, an unsolved maritime mystery. The mystery of the SS Orang Medan is one of the most chilling maritime enigmas of the 20th century. This ghost ship, discovered in 1947, continues to baffle and intrigue those who hear its story. The case is shrouded in mystery, filled with eerie details and unanswered questions that have left maritime historians and enthusiasts puzzled for decades. The discovery. In June 1947, distress signals were picked up by several ships in the vicinity of the Straits of Malacca, a busy waterway between the Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra. The messages received over the radio were cryptic and alarming. All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in the chart room and on the bridge. Possibly the whole crew is dead. The final transmission was even more chilling. I die. The SOS call came from the SS Orang Medan, a Dutch freighter. The message was broadcasted to nearby vessels, including the American ship Silver Star, which was closest to the reported position. The Silver Star's crew responded promptly and located the Orang Medan adrift in the waters of the Straits of Malacca, near the coast of Sumatra. The discovery of the ship. When the crew of the Silver Star boarded the Orang Medan to investigate, they were met with a horrifying scene. The ship appeared to be in perfect order, with no signs of damage or visible distress. However, the horror lay in the condition of the crew. the bodies of the captain and crew members were found lying in grotesque positions, frozen expressions of terror. The corpses were found on the bridge, in the chart room, and throughout the ship, all of them exhibiting a bizarre and unsettling sight. Their faces were contorted in fear, with their mouths and eyes wide open, as if they had seen something horrifying before their deaths. The strange and unsettling nature of the scene was compounded by the fact that there were no signs of external injuries or violence. The crew members had apparently died from some unknown cause. The ship's cargo and its holds were intact, and there was no sign of any external attack or tampering. The mysterious explosion. The investigation into the mysterious deaths of the crew was abruptly cut short. As the Silver Star's crew prepared to tow the Orang Medan to port for further examination, a sudden explosion occurred on board. The explosion was powerful enough to split the ship in two, sending the wreckage sinking to the bottom of the sea. Fortunately, no one from the Silver Star was injured in the explosion, but the mysterious fate of the Orang Medan was sealed. Theories and speculations. The sudden and unexplained explosion, combined with the eerie discovery of the crew's bodies, has given rise to numerous theories and speculations. Various hypotheses have been proposed to explain the tragedy. Toxic gas release. One theory suggests that the crew may have been exposed to a toxic gas or chemical, either accidentally or as a result of illegal cargo. This could have caused the deaths and the panic seen done in their final moments. However, no evidence of such gases was found, and no other ships reported similar incidents. Supernatural causes. Given the eerie and unexplained aspects of the case, some have suggested supernatural explanations. The sudden and unexplained deaths, combined with the ghostly appearance of the bodies, have led to speculation about curses, hauntings, or other paranormal phenomena. Criminal activity. Another theory posits that the crew might have been involved in illicit activities, such as smuggling or drug trafficking. This could have led to a confrontation or a chemical spill, resulting in their deaths. However, this theory lacks concrete evidence and remains speculative. Military or government experiments. Some have speculated that the ship's crew might have been exposed to secret military experiments or weapons, leading to their deaths. This theory is supported by the ship's mysterious and sudden explosion, though no evidence of such experiments has been found. The legacy of the SS Orang Medan. The story of the SS Orang Medan remains one of the most haunting maritime mysteries of the 20th century. Despite numerous investigations and theories, the true cause of the crew's deaths and the reason for the ship's sudden explosion remain unknown. The case has become a legend in maritime lore, symbolizing the unknown dangers of the sea and the mysteries that can lurk in the depths. The ghost ship continues to capture the imagination of those interested in maritime mysteries, and its story serves as a chilling reminder of the vast and enigmatic nature of the world's oceans.